Here we are amongst the dead of Ross Bay Cemetery. This week on the Gazebo Show, we'll be talking about death. Like,
subscribe,
and welcome to another edition of the Gazebo Show with Jimmy Fritz and
Gorilla Billy.
All right, this week we're going to talk about Death, the Grim Reaper. The 6th episode, number 6, folks.
Yep.
Keep up, gotta keep up.
Yep.
They're coming thick and fast. So, Death. Let's start off with a definition.
Well, Death. Yeah, it's the guy with the big cloak who carries a scythe.
Mm-hmm, that's right. You got that right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's interesting because the definition of death has changed over the years. It used to be people would just pass out and become unconscious. They think they were dead. So they'd bury them and found, scratch marks on the inside of coffins. So that was the expression of dead ringer. You'd put a bell in the thing, and a string, and if you were still alive, because it happened. Or they put you by the fire. That's why they did the wake. They put your body by the fire to see if you warm up after a few hours. Maybe you weren't quite dead, because they didn't really know how to figure out if you were dead. Oh. And then it was like no breath. So you'd use a mirror, or you'd hear for the breath. When the breath was gone, you were dead. Right. But your heart can still be beating, and your brain can still be functioning. So then it was the heartbeat. Stopping your heartbeat, stopping your breathing. Then you were dead, right? Mm-hmm. Wrong. Because your brain is still going. So now we use brain dead, but it's different in different states and it's different in different countries. Some people say it's 1 minute brain dead, 10 minutes, 6 minutes, whatever it is. So there are different yardsticks for predicting death. There have been people that have gone down, whose hearts are stopped. In heart surgery, they can stop the heart, they can drain all the blood out and bring you back. There have been cases of people who've been brain dead for months and with no response, and they actually came back. So there might just be a few neurons percolating in the background, which you can use to revive yourself. So I think we need to bring back the bell.
Yeah, the bell seems like a good idea. I read somewhere recently that research had demonstrated that you briefly know you're dead before you die.
Well, I talk about that extensively in my book, The End of Everything. Because at one point, the main character thinks he's dying, and he goes into a long examination of how many neurons would it take to be aware of the fact that you were dying. And if you were aware, and those certain amount of neurons were firing, then you weren't technically dead.
Right.
So if death is the absence of neural activity, then you can't know.
Right. So that instant where the brain's still active, you're not dead. So it's not you knowing you're dead. You're just not dead yet.
You might be thinking that you're almost dead.
You've got
might be thinking, well, that's
pretty good idea about what's happening to you.
But people do have a big problem with death, and for many, particularly for young people, they find it quite frightening to think about it or deal with it. And of course, when you get older and it gets nearer and nearer and nearer, you have to come to terms with it.
Well,
you have
funnily
to come
enough,
to peace with it.
When I was younger, I didn't have a problem with death. I used to think, well, I've lived such a full life. It wouldn't bother me if I died tomorrow. But that was just kind of a naive fantasy. I don't think if I was facing death at that time, I would have been so blasé about it. But I certainly recall having that thought, death wouldn't be so bad. I've already had a good, full life.
Right. Well, that's the way I feel about it now. Like, if I drop dead tomorrow, I'd be fine with it. Because I feel like I've had a good life.
Well, I've still got some books to write. Speaking of which, this is my book. It's in bookshelves at the moment. Guerrilla Tactics.
Rush out and get a copy, folks.
Get your copy, folks.
Buy someone for a Christmas present. Ram Dass, a.k.a. Richard Alper, went to India at one point on it's a Sikh spirituality, and he became a sadhu and got a guru.
Right.
And he asked his guru, he said, everybody in the West is terrified of dying, and what should I tell them about dying? And his guru said, tell them that it won't do them any harm. Yeah, it won't do you any harm. Because people worried about the dying process and the actual, feeling the life drain out of you.
Right.
But they don't really, there's no reason to fear not existing. because we didn't exist for 4 billion years before our birth,
Oh.
and we won't exist for billions of years after our life. So in between, we get this brief spark of life to enjoy. And we don't worry about the 4 billion years that we didn't exist.
Right.
We don't find that scary. But we find not existing in the future scary.
Scary.
And it's really the same thing. So don't worry about death, folks. It's fine.
Yeah.
And it'll do you no harm.
And remember, kids, no lives matter.
Like, subscribe.
Yeah, death, interesting subject. I mean, I've been researching this early 17th century, and you do get an impression that life was worth a lot less back then.
Absolutely, yeah.
But at the same time, it's easy to get carried away and assume that, he died. No, they were loved ones. And if you lost a loved one, you grieved. Grieving probably goes back to the caveman days, and well, it certainly goes back to apes. We see that happening. So it's not as if we were blasé about death. If we lost a loved one, we felt it. But there was a lot more of it going on.
I think a lot more of it going on. I mean, given the lack of medical science and hygiene, people were dropping like flies, really. So if you had a big family, if you had 8 kids, 5 of them would probably die.
Yeah.
So people were much more accustomed to death and dealing with it.
Yeah. And a lot of people carried swords, and they'd lose it quite easily.
Right.
Over some really trivial thing. Someone
That's
would end
right.
up dead.
I think we should bring that back too.
Yes. The sword, hand-to-hand combat.
I call it the cold, hard steel of truth.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, once we invented the bow and arrow, we distanced ourselves from the killing.
That's right.
But up until then, there had been the dignity in, one-on-one with your own sword and the survival of the
That's
fittest.
right.
your
Feeling
wits.
that steel go through the gizzards and twisting it and pulling it out. There was a satisfaction in that, an immediacy.
The drone operators. I mean, they're in Nevada, operating death from the sky in the Middle East, and apparently they still suffer from trauma.
Yeah, well, they know what they're doing. I mean, it's not a, it's kind of an illusion, but they know that the reality is. They know that when that bomb goes off, people die.
Yes.
They can't shield themselves from that.
No.
I think it is different if it's at a distance.
Yes.
And you can't really take on grieving for every dead person on the planet because there's millions of them.
No.
And we don't have that capacity.
Referring, to gorillas again, there's quite a lot of evidence of them mourning, and when they realize that, say, a silverback has died, he usually takes them up to a high point where he can be left, so they can go back down again and leave him up there. There's kind of a ritual to that, and when they realize, he's on his last breath, they'll all come by one,
right,
and make some kind of recognition of him, give him some kind of bidding goodbye to wherever he's going.
Elephants do that too.
Yes, they do. Yeah. And
I saw one where they're coming up and the whole group and they all stop dead, and the matriarch goes forward and there's some bones, there's a head bone and some other bones, and she kind of sniffs around and pushes it, and they all come and stand around in a circle, and they're all kind of touching it, and they hang around there for the longest time, and then wander off. So it's like there's an acknowledgement there that somebody died.
Yeah. I mean, burying the dead is a practical solution to a problem, obviously. Bring out your dead. But at the same time, we made a ritual out of it, which I think is important to maintain. I'm not happy with these ceremonies of celebration of life. I want a good, solid funeral with some somber-looking people wearing
some
black.
Depressing, some women wailing.
Yeah, and
Get
rain coming down. Yeah, and
some professional wailers in.
Yeah, and an undertaker with a top hat, real thin, guy that doesn't look like he's gone out on them.
Like a skeleton
Yeah,
guy.
exactly. Who seems strangely satisfied by the ceremony. Yeah, death isn't what it used to be. Give us your take on death. How do you see it? How are you approaching it?
Approaching it?
Yeah, in your
Well, I'm going
twilight.
to kill myself.
Right? When?
When the time comes. When my quality of life is diminished to the point where it becomes unacceptable. And, that would be mobility or losing your mind or some horrible disease that's going to take you out on a slow, painful death. I'm going to preempt that. So I'm going to get made, and I'm going to go out on this bench.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going to peg out on this bench, have a big party, and in the morning, peg out.
But it's a fine line between when you're feeling a little bit ill not terribly well right
Yeah,
now,
right.
and when it's time to top yourself.
Exactly, and that limit is different. Sometimes just a bad headache can do it.
Exactly. Oh, fuck this. All right, today's the day. Yeah, Hunter Thompson took himself out fairly early, but when you realize the complications he was going through, and he had, foresaw his own death, he wasn't going to live through some kind of decrepitude.
No, and he wanted to go out with a bang, and he did.
He did.
Got
Indeed.
his favourite Colt 45, and blew his brains out. I think that's a terrible way to go. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think I could do that.
No, it's a bit
I don't think I
messy.
could like shoot myself in the head. I think that would be such a violent, shocking thing. I want to go out with with the right drugs. And now I've seen people go out with Maid, and it's very peaceful, and it's very quick, and it's very painless. So that's the way to go. I mean, there's lots of diseases that take months or even years to kill you. And it's not just it's not just horrible for yourself. It's a real burden on the people around you. They have to grin and bear it and stick with it right to the bitter end. And it's not. I wouldn't want to bring that on anybody.
No.
I wouldn't want somebody looking after me if I was bedridden and dying and in pain and had a miserable life. I mean, what's the point of that?
No, I saw both my parents go with rapid decline in their mobility. From being compos mentis to being a vegetable was a very short period of time. I mean, I watched that suffering. I certainly don't want to go through that myself. But how do you prepare yourself for death?
Let go.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of how you prepare yourself for life too.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to someone today, and they were going, "So you have to let go of lots of it." This person had a lot of inner conflicts and a lot of emotional turmoil. I said, "The thing is, you can't deal with all those problems and solve all the problems of the past. But you can let them go."
You gotta let that shit go, homie.
And I think that's the trick to life. Life is sort of letting go of the conflicts and the strife and the struggle. You can let that stuff go. You don't have to deal with every tiny little detail and ruin your life over it. So then life becomes easy.
And the less stressed you are, the more likely you are going to live longer.
Yeah, life is hard, but death is a doddle. It really does solve every single problem you have instantly and irrevocably.
Yeah. All your debts go away. I certainly feel I'm entering the twilight years, where I've got less time ahead of me than behind me. And it's an interesting transition. I've certainly felt it in my 60s more than in my 50s or 40s.
Right.
I in my 40s and 50s, I acknowledged I was entering a middle age. But in my 60s, thoughts of death become more pressing and less stressful. So
We laugh in the face of death.
when I was in Africa, there was a take on death they had there that used to really annoy me. I went to a couple friends' funerals while I was there. Terrible boda accidents, too young to die. And everybody, the murmur going around the memorial was, it was obviously God's plan. It was God's will that they die now. I said, you're fucking joking. I mean, it's just better safety standards on the roads is what is needed here. It was fate, and that God had this in mind for you. What, to drag you under a truck? They did a lot of that in the Middle Ages, didn't they? Finding inventive, creative ways to kill people.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, drawing and quarter. I mean, what's the point of that? 4 horses to drag you in 4 different directions. You're already dead.
Yeah.
What's the point they're making? Okay,
Well, they didn't just want to kill you, they wanted to punish you.
Yeah.
They really wanted you to suffer, right?
There's some good music about death, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there's some good art about death. I mean, most people comes up as it's a big subject, because it's dramatic and it's so final. And there's a lot of,
I love
views.
Rachmaninoff's Die Toteninsel, the Island of the Dead. That's just fantastic. I mean, it's just this slow, gradual rise of strings as you cross. It was very dark and gloomy passage of water into the land of Styx.
And does it fizzle out at the end?
No, it gets more and more dramatic.
Well, it should fizzle out.
It should, yeah.
Dying.
But no, Rachmaninoff had it in mind that you would be heading to, I don't know.
Should fizzle out to
Long
nothing and
journey.
then turn the lights out.
The Egyptians had some pretty funky ideas about afterlife, didn't they?
Well, they had a lot of crazy ideas, yeah.
Yeah, but that's because they had perfected embalming. They needed something to do with it. I've invented embalming. Oh, well, what good's that for?
The afterlife.
Serving pharaohs? I went to the Cairo Museum and saw the pharaoh room. and it was quite extraordinary. I can still see it. I mean, I must have been 8 or 9 years old, but I still, like, what? And they don't just have 1 or 2 in there. You know,
Right.
the Pharaoh room at the Cairo Museum, they have. It's
They were like rack on racks.
yeah, they're on racks. Yeah, and there's Ramses with his hand up like this, because when they unwrapped his bandages,
went
some
doing-
tensile strength had kept his hand like that.
Uh-huh.
He slapped the mummy hunter.
The Curse of the Mummy. So that's another edition of the Gazebo Show, people. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yep.
Like.
And subscribe.
Exactly.
And check out our websites, jimmyfritz.ca and bluegorillagiving.ca, as written below us here.
Don't forget to buy our books.
Yep, books,
Many books.
many books.
Buy them all.